Hello everyone, welcome to week 4, day 1. This week what we are dealing with is chapter 3 and chapter 14. Chapter 3 is what I'm going to discuss for the day 1 video because it talks about law and ethics and HIPAA. Law and ethics has 4 different classifications or categories that it can be broken down into. Those 4 categories are criminal law, civil law, international law, and military law. Now really only 2 of those categories are going to relate to medical, and those 2 are criminal laws and civil laws. So that's what I'm going to focus on for the video information. Criminal laws are laws that are made to protect individuals and the public health as a whole, and they want to protect those from harmful acts of others. Criminal laws fall into 2 different categories: felonies and misdemeanors. Felonies are acts that carry out a punishment of either imprisonment in a state or local prison or the death sentence. Some examples of felonies could be things such as murder, rape, robbery, or, in reference to the medical profession, practicing without a license. Misdemeanors, on the other hand, are less serious. They're going to carry a punishment of either fines or imprisonment for up to a year. Some examples could be traffic violations, disturbing the peace, or theft. Now, when we talk about criminal laws, a physician's license is something that can be taken away if they commit a crime. Some examples of crimes that they can commit are things such as sexual misdemeanors or misconduct, murder, or violating narcotics laws. Now, we as medical assistants do not have a license, so that means that we will work under the physician's license. Now, because we work under the physician's license does not make us a physician. We still cannot make any diagnoses on a patient. And if you are caught trying to diagnose a patient or treating a patient, you can also be fined and prosecuted, even though you don't have that license. So please make sure that you understand, as a medical assistant, your job is not to diagnose the patient. Your job is to help the provider in his diagnosis. So doing all of the steps that you need to before the doctor is able to see that patient. Civil laws are laws that concern a relationship between individuals or between individuals and the government. Civil laws can be broken down into 3 subcategories: tort laws, contract laws, and administrative laws. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at each of those. Tort laws are laws that cover acts that result in harm to another. In the medical world and in medical law, this means that it must cause damage or an injury to a patient. It must be caused by the physician or a healthcare employee, such as a medical assistant like ourselves. Charges can either be called intentional tort or unintentional tort. And it's really important that you understand what the difference is. An intentional tort are when you actually mean and you intentionally act without the patient's consent. For example, assault, battery, false imprisonment, defamation of character, fraud, or invasion of privacy. You intentionally do something to cause pain. Unintentional torts can be labeled as neglect or negligence. Something you didn't mean to do, but it happened. In order to prove that negligence or neglect has happened, the patient will have to present the 4 Ds. And those 4 Ds are duty, dereliction of duty, damages, and direct cause. Contract laws are laws that include enforceable promises or agreements between 2 or more parties to do or not to do a particular action or service. A contract between these parties must be composed of 4 different parts or subcategories. Those subcategories are: there has to be an offer made, there has to be an acceptance from one of the parties, there has to be a consideration time, and a competency. All 4 of those need to be present in order to make that contract legal. And the final type of law is the administrative laws. These are laws that cover regulations set forth by governmental agencies. Most healthcare employees are more frequently going to be part of this than contract or tort laws, so we don't want to touch too much on administrative because we are not as frequently going to be part of this administrative law because this is part of the governmental agency. Sorry, I misspoke there. Administrative laws that can fall under this can be things such as violations against HIPAA or Medicaid or Medicare fraud. So the other part to Chapter 3 that I really want to kind of touch base with you guys is understanding a malpractice. Malpractice is any unreasonable lack of skills that results in an injury, a loss, or a damage to a patient. When we talk about malpractice claims and lawsuits, they're classified into 3 categories. They're either a malfeasance, a misfeasance, or a nonfeasance. A malfeasance is when you perform a wrongful act or unlawful act. A misfeasance means you performed a lawful act but in a non-proper way. And a nonfeasance means that you neglected, ignored, or refused to perform a necessary lawful act. Alright, so that's all the law and ethics part. I want to discuss HIPAA as well because that is a really important part of your job and your careers as medical assistants. So HIPAA stands for Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It was a law that was passed by government and by Congress in 1996. And really the purpose of HIPAA is to seek improvements on efficiency, effectiveness, and the healthcare system as a whole through insurance reforms and administrative simplifications. Simply put, we want to make sure that all of our patients have a right to their personal privacy, have their personal privacy respected, and their medical records handled with confidentiality. What this means is no information can be told to another person without the written consent of our patients. That even goes for when we are sending them to a specialty maybe, or another physician for a second opinion. HIPAA gives more control to our patients and for our patients to have more control over their health information as a whole. Medical practices do require and are required to notify their patients about the use of their medical records, any disclosures of their medical records, and the rights to have their information protected. Medical assistants like ourselves also must be very vigilant when we're protecting this information because we are the front runners for our patients. We are the patient advocates, so we need to make sure that their information is being kept private as well. HIPAA does require that all medical employees undergo a training session and during their orientation. This is generally what's going to happen within the first 30 days of their hire-on. When we go into that HIPAA orientation and that HIPAA training, it does get categorized into 3 subparts. Part 1 is privacy regulations. Part 2 is the transaction standards. And lastly, Part 3 is security regulations. Alright guys, that is really all I want to touch on for this video. As always, it is your responsibility to read the chapter in full. I really suggest that you do that because I do know A lot of the quiz questions do appear on or from this chapter, as well as chapter 14. So I really suggest that you guys take a great look at your chapter 3. And if you have any questions or comments or something doesn't make sense, please know you can always reach out to me when we meet on day 1 or day 2. But you can also reach out to your lecture instructor as well. I look forward to seeing you guys on day 1. Have a wonderful week, guys. Bye-bye.